Welcome to the episode. I'm Dr. Armin Feldman, and as always, I'm here with my friend, colleague, and partner in Physicians Legal Consultants, Dr. Mike Bummer.
Hi, everyone, and hello to everyone listening on the audio version of our podcast via the Apple Podcast app or the Google Play Store, the two most common places that people listen, and also on YouTube. And you can find us on YouTube by just going into YouTube and searching for Physicians Helping Attorneys, and our channel pops right up. And don't forget to subscribe. You can hit the bell to get notified of new episodes. And if you're listening on the audio portion of our podcast, go ahead and follow us and you'll get alerted when new episodes come out.
Great.
So, Armin, I didn't even tell you, but over the last 24 hours, I was able to reach out to one of the members of your coaching program.
Oh,
For
okay.
for those listeners who don't know, Armin does teach other physicians how to conduct this type of medical legal consulting, and we've kind of network with each other and often help each other. It's a nice community, and I had an attorney who needed specifically an orthopedic expert, and I know this individual that you've helped coach for this legal work,
Mhm.
and I reached out and it was a great fit, and the attorney was thrilled. The coaching member was happy to get this case that involved some rib injuries from a car crash, and it was just a win-win all around. And I wanted to share that with you.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned it. That's really exciting.
Yeah. What about you? What's new?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm happy to say there probably isn't too much new, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? Where life just goes along as you hope it would. But I'll tell you a funny story. This morning, I was getting ready for the day, and I like to play music, and I love music. And so today I was playing Boy Genius, right? That's a three-woman group, and they're really come onto the scene. And in fact, recently they won a Grammy. I think it was for new artists. So anyway, I'm listening to the music, and Holly walks into the room, and so I thought I'd decide to pat myself on the back, and I mentioned, this is Boy Genius, but I was listening to them 6 months ago, way before the Grammy Award. So I was pleased I was ahead of the curve.
That's awesome. Social validation that you have good taste in music.
I hope.
So today's episode is going to be a good one. We have two cases we're going to discuss, and that also reminds me, if as you're listening you have any questions or you have a case that you would like us to chime in on or see if we can help, go ahead and email us is the easiest way at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn and send us a connection request and send us a message via LinkedIn, because we're also putting out LinkedIn newsletters with additional information, and you don't want to miss the content. We have a lot of different easy to digest ways of getting that content to you.
Great.
But today's cases, we'll kind of do a quick intro. My case is going to involve a really interesting path toward finding the right expert after having to talk to over half a dozen experts for a very unique case. And what about you, Armin? What are you going to talk about?
Well, maybe we should name this episode Unique Cases, because you have a rare case situation, and we didn't discuss this, but I have a rare case situation. And my case involves my observing psychiatric IME and then writing an IME rebuttal report.
Excellent. Excellent. So, jumping in, I'll go first.
Good.
This case involved a woman who was tragically kind of mowed down by a bicycle while she was walking on a busy sidewalk. And this biker had no right being on the sidewalk, first of all, so clearly liable, and plowed her down. The woman's in her 50s, and caused all sorts of facial trauma, lacerations, and she's taken to the hospital and determined to have no significant musculoskeletal injuries, but she was missing teeth from the accident, needed to follow up with a dentist, and also had facial lacerations that were repaired and sutured. and pretty traumatized for this woman in her late 50s.
Yeah, sounds like a horrible accident.
She went home and was recovering, kind of just getting through it. And the next day, she started to feel abdominal pain, and significant abdominal pain, not just run-of-the-mill pain. So she went back to the ER, and they ended up running a whole slew of tests and determined that she had blood clots near her spleen and in her abdomen. So they admitted her, and she was in the hospital for the better part of about 3 weeks. And they ended up diagnosing her after a slew of consultations with various specialties with polyarteritis nodosa vasculitis. That's abbreviated PAN vasculitis. Now, I should mention, Armin, she had a history that was well treated for the past 15 years of Crohn's disease.
Right. An autoimmune disease of the guts, of the intestines, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what's the layman's description of what you just mentioned as a diagnosis?
Would be a systemic inflammation. So widespread inflammation that affects any part of the body. It could be the skin, kidneys, liver, bowels, and really blood vessels. Her issue was this inflammation was attacking her blood vessels.
Not good.
Not good at all. So the attorney reached out to us and he said, hey, this is just failing my common sense test of this has to be related to this. And this woman has all of these medical bills, and the rest of her life may be different. She may be on treatment for this inflammation for years and years to come.
Right.
And this has to be related to this bicycle trauma, right?
Sure.
And
temporally, it sure is, right?
It really felt like it. I couldn't disagree with him.
Right.
But I didn't know what the literature would say, and certainly we have to support our opinions with evidence-based research.
Right.
So I went to the literature. Lo and behold, this has happened many times before in our line of work. I find 3 or 4 papers written within the last decade that cite physical, emotional, and psychiatric stressors that can lead and or aggravate or precipitate autoimmune conditions.
Okay.
Not only that, but autoimmune vasculitis. So
specifically to this problem.
Kind of specifically, but the literature is tricky, Armin, because this is a very rare condition.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very rare. And so finding specific research is almost impossible, because there are you probably could count the number of diagnoses of this condition on 1 or 2 hands, in a year within major health systems, if that. So the next step that he needed, he really was looking for a causation expert, someone to say that this long hospitalization and all these medical problems are in some way, in some apportionment, related to this traumatic, emotional, physical trauma that this woman experienced.
Yeah.
And finding experts is something that we do quite frequently. Vetting, coordinating experts, discussing complicated medical facts with them, making sure that our attorneys get the right experts. It's actually quite enjoyable. And I started to call rheumatologists to answer this and see if they could be on board with this thought, because it's kind of far-fetched in a way initially, because typically vasculitis develop over some time, and they're not usually considered to be acute conditions.
Right.
So I'll kind of cut to the chase and let you know, I called about 6 different rheumatologists, and the reason I called more than 1 or 2 doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that I wasn't really getting the feedback that was going to be helpful. It was more of it wasn't positive nor negative. It was like,
I don't know.
I don't know, and I don't think there's going to be literature to support that.
Right.
And then I would offer, well, how about, I found this literature. Would you want to? And the experts were kind of lukewarm on that.
Mm.
Just being very honest, being very blunt with you and our listeners. So I wasn't willing to give up though, because knowing what I knew about this case,
Mm-hmm.
and the attorney involved is an excellent attorney,
Mm-hmm.
and this woman needed the help. So I kind of kept going, and like anything in life,
That's all you, Mike.
persistence pays off sometimes. And I
Yeah.
found an expert who, when I presented the matter, he said, "Send me the research and let me sleep on it. Let me give it a think."
Yeah.
And we talked the next day, and after reviewing what I had sent him and thinking through it, he said, "I'm fully and ethically able to agree that this must be related to this woman's development in some way, shape, or form, to her vasculitis, to her systemic inflammation, and that this event led to a cascade of events that caused this condition."
And that
And
was your opinion too, right, Mike?
it really was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll help attorneys answer whatever questions they need, but
Right. And
we
we're happy to
also
tell them when we don't think there's a case or you can't prove up that particular medical theory. So you felt this was, it was your opinion, your medical opinion, that this woman did get this secondary to this trauma.
100%.
Yeah.
And I needed validation by an expert who could go on record within that subspecialty, who, is board certified in rheumatology and has treated vasculitis before. Because my opinion, albeit helpful to the attorney to know that he's not crazy,
Mm.
doesn't get him over the threshold legally
Right.
to move the case forward. And it's wild, Armin. I think we can share that after this occurred and the report was written, our attorney got back to us and sent one of our favorite emails that we get all the time, and he said, "Thanks for your work. The case settled for policy limits."
Yeah, that's just great. Really helped that person, right? I mean, here was a woman really suffering. There was some question whether she was going to be supported by her insurance company and had big bills. And the expert also agreed that this was trauma related and helped the case, helped the attorney, and certainly helped this injured person.
I love it. That's why I got so fired up about that case. It's unusual to require that level, but it was worth it for everyone.
Great.
Let's jump over to your unique case for the day.
Okay. So one of my attorney clients who we work together frequently, she wanted me to observe a psychiatric IME. And, we observe IMEs, whatever the specialty, right? But this one happened to be a psychiatric one. And so the story was that this is a 39-year-old man who worked delivering for a shipping company, right? And it started off as a pretty typical case. So he had this really bulky, really heavy package. It was a long box that was probably 7 feet long and only a foot wide. And he's pulling this out of the truck and he gets sharp back pain. Long story short, MRI, he's got 3 lumbar ruptured discs. And so that set off the case. Now, the hooker in the case, in my medical opinion, the hooker in the case is about a year after this injury, and he was still in treatment, and there were the opposing counsel, of course, and opposing doctors were claiming a number of things. Maybe even though he had ruptured disc, that he was exaggerating. Maybe he was malingering. He wasn't a good historian, et cetera, et cetera. Well, about a year after this event, he had a weird, strange symptom, neurologic, and maybe respiratory event. And he was diagnosed with another extremely rare condition called panhypopituitarism. And what this means in English is the pituitary gland sits at the base of the brain. And it is primarily responsible for the production of a number of essential hormones: thyroid hormone, cortisone, growth hormone, and others. And so it took a while to make this diagnosis, but the other interesting thing is I actually went to three different IMEs for this particular individual, and at every one, his father was also there. And his father let me know that after this event, it came on slowly, but he had cognition problems, he had emotional problems, and in fact, his father told me that his whole personality had changed. And so the medical way to look at this is that he probably had the condition onset maybe even before the ruptured discs, but it took a long time to make the diagnosis. So he probably went at least a year without sufficient hormones, without thyroid hormone, without cortisone, without growth hormone. And so what happened is it's quite likely that certainly my opinion, that the cognitive problems, the personality change, and so forth was related to this loss of normal hormone levels. So he got on hormone replacement, thyroid hormone replacement, cortisone replacement, growth hormone replacement. And what he told me is that he took all these medicines, so one was like every 2 weeks. Oh, and also testosterone. Testosterone was an injection every 2 weeks. One of the medications was 3 times a day. The thyroid hormone replacement was in the morning. And his mood, the way he felt about himself, the way he experienced the world, varied somewhat depending on how close he was to the next dose. Mm-hmm. So that's the background. So we go into the psychiatric IME, and it becomes, and I'll tell you what the issues were in a moment, but it becomes obvious to me that this man had complete concrete thinking, right? So he had lost the ability to abstract. His father told me that he was a B+ student in high school. Well, you can't be a B+ student in high school if you can't think abstractly, right? Okay. So what I'm talking about is if you say to somebody, well, a rolling stone gathers no moss, right? Somebody might think, well, if you're really busy and active, you will be able to achieve your goals or something like that. If you ask this man what that means, he would say, well, as the stone rolls down, it's moving too fast to pick up any moss. That's concrete thinking. And
Armin, before you continue, I just want to make sure, because this is so unique and interesting. Are you relating, orient me real quick, are you relating these cognitive psychiatric changes also to the injury that was sustained with moving? No, okay, I didn't think so. But I didn't see how they were or were not related. But I guess you're getting to it. Yeah, okay. This is great.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it's related. So one of the things in the IME report was that the psychiatrist said that he was malingering or trying to manipulate the situation, or driven by secondary gain or something like that, because one of the issues was he said that the client said he didn't have any back pain until this, or he didn't have any injury to his back until he ruptured his disc. But in the medical record, it shows that he'd been treated by chiropractors for his back over the years. So the story behind that is the company actually held educational sessions for their delivery drivers to try to help them so they wouldn't get injured, right? And they brought in various chiropractors. So in this guy's mind, he was going to see the chiropractors for back pain that happened because he lifts a lot of boxes. But he didn't have an injury. He just had back pain, right? That was his thinking about it. And so once he had these ruptured discs, then in his mind, he had a back injury. So the psychiatrist said, well, he's obviously lying because he said he didn't have a back injury until the ruptured disc, but he clearly had back problems before. And the client tried to explain to the psychiatrist, well, and he told this whole story about the chiropractors and going to the chiropractors, and the psychiatrist couldn't see the connection that because of his cognition problems and specifically his concrete thinking problems, back pain in his mind was completely different than having a back injury. But one was for maintenance and one is because he had an injury. So he didn't have the back injury until the ruptured discs. So that's one of the things that I rebutted in the report.
Okay.
The next thing is that it was evident that when the psychiatrist would ask this man questions, he stumbled on a lot of the answers. And at least it was clear to me in observing this that he wasn't processing the information. He wasn't dissembling, right? As the psychiatrist put in his report. He made this example of, I'd ask him, he didn't quite say it in these words, but I'd ask him a question and he would be evasive or he wouldn't answer it, or it sure seemed to me that he was lying, right? And it seemed pretty clear to me that he couldn't process this information. He was stumbling over his answers. Sometimes he couldn't even answer. He just stopped, right? Stopped talking because of the problems that he had due to the lack of all the hormones before there was, and even with the hormone replacement, it was too late, right? It was too late to reverse these cognitive problems. So that was another part of my rebuttal. And so the last piece is that he did have neuropsychological testing, and it wasn't even completed. He couldn't complete it. And so the psychiatrist's opinion of that was that, again, he was trying to manipulate his injury. That's what was in the report. And again, it was my opinion that because of these problems he had due to having no hormones for over a year, and cognitive deficits and personality change and all, that's why he couldn't complete the neuropsych testing. It wasn't because he was trying to enhance his settlement amount or try to get money out of it or whatever, that it was clearly due to something else.
That's fascinating. That, just to summarize, because this is new hearing this to me, and that you were able to explain essentially the reason why this attorney's client was accused, in your opinion, falsely of malingering or being untruthful or avoiding certain information because of a very rare underlying condition,
right,
that in fact really well explains that behavior, and in fact then in a way removes the ability for the psychiatrist, as your rebuttal, to improperly accuse the client of being untruthful or not helpful, and then thus helping your attorney ultimately prove and support that the injuries and information that the client went through are in fact truthful because of this. That's wild.
Yeah.
Great job.
Well, thanks. And just like in your case, at this particular case, I did get feedback, and based on my report And based on the client's attorney doing such a great job, he was awarded a future medical care per his workers' compensation insurance.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Really well done. That's interesting. See, Armin, you've said it and I say it. We have yet to meet a case where we haven't added value for what our affordable services are bringing to the table.
Yeah, we almost always will add value to the case.
Yeah. So, again, if anyone does have a case that they want to run by us or just reach out and ask some questions, you again email us at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're there, Dr. Armin Feldman, Dr. Mike Bummer. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on your podcast station. And we're always up for a good chat and a good case, a good, stimulating, unique case.
And I would finish up by saying, Mike, if you're an attorney and you have a case, please get a hold of us by emailing us at comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. And we look forward to having you on the next episode.